Hello friends, good morning. This is Shankar Swaminathan again from New Jersey. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the 70-hour work week concept that Mr. Narayan Murthy of INFOSYS has suggested. He came up with the idea some time back that Indian workers should be working at least about 70 hours a week for India to increase its productivity so that it can actually become one of the top 3 developed countries or whatever. Now India seems to be within the top 5, one of the top 5 countries by going by the GDP. As we know, Mr. Murthy founded the reputed software firm INFOSYS and led it from the front, and very creditably at that. That company was, by all accounts, run very professionally by the Indian standards. But then, even before INFOSYS was there, came into the picture, there were also other players like TCS and Wipro, and I think there was also CMC. Quite a few other players other than INFOSYS. They were already there in the field of computer software. As much as I know about Murthy, I'm not sure if he has had the experience of running a manufacturing service organization or even a financial service organization, leading it from the front, heading such an organization. We all know that he was the founder of INFOSYS, as I said, but I'm not sure about his experience in the other fields nor his insights into how manufacturing organizations are run, or service organizations are run, financial service organizations. So in my view, given Mr. Murthy's lack of experience in practically any other industry other than software industry, his views on the 70-hour work week, I think, is given excessive space and consideration in the media, including social media. Mr. Murthy has been a manager, a top manager, right? But to be a management expert is different than being a manager. A management expert should be able to develop right perspectives on a variety of things concerning management in different settings, in different environments, and in different contexts, in different industries. And such an expert should have a broad picture about how things would work out. For example, this concept of 70-hour work week, is it really that necessary? Or in what ways it could be productive or even counterproductive? All of those things. I'm not sure if Mr. Murthy has actually talked about all of those things when he suggested this idea of 70-hour work week. I do have respect for Mr. Murthy for being an excellent entrepreneur in the field of computer software, and even more, being an excellent public relations man. Mr. Murthy's efforts and work abroad has indeed helped the country earn huge foreign exchange for the country, and it did indeed set a trend to establish India as a leading computer software service providers, predominant player. So now coming back to the idea of 70-hour work week for the Indian worker, I personally feel it is just not needed, it is just not necessary. It could be quite disadvantageous. In short, it's a very ridiculous idea. Before I talk about it in some detail, I am just wondering why the other very respected captains of the industries have not, like Mr. Ratan Tata or Mukesh Ambani or even Adani or even Anand Mahindra, who is quite active on social media and in fact quite popular there as well. As much as I know, they have not actually voiced their opinion on this 70-hour work week of Mr. Murthy. So, but in my view, these ones are, in terms of their experience, far more qualified than Mr. Murthy to talk on such an idea, such a concept, given the vast and varied experiences they've all had in running manufacturing organizations on a large scale. I have also not seen anyone from the government, any of the senior IAS or senior bureaucrat, or any senior public sector executive commenting on the same. Mr. Murthy's idea, I think broadly has been discussed only in some channels, media channels, and in the social media, of course. Mr. Murthy has always given me an impression of one who likes to stay in the limelight, offering views on all and sundry topics. And I have always had questions about his insights on various issues, as simple and as uncomplicated as they were. Now he has sought to buttress his 70-hour work week argument, citing many NRIs and others from abroad supporting his views. I, for one, as I said before, have been living abroad for almost close to 20 years. I am a holder of Canadian passport and can say for a fact that NRIs extending support to anything and everything that Mr. Murthy dishes out in his wisdom is no ultimate validation. Mr. Murthy, as I said before, is indeed a good public relations ambassador of India. And it would be no surprise if NRIs feel proud of him. I am personally proud of him for all that he has actually accomplished. But Mr. Murthy citing NRI support, if anything, is only further proof of his very simple thinking, simple-mindedness, simple approach. In public life, eminent personalities like Mr. Murthy can express views on anything and everything to be heard, and for sure it would be covered by the media. It would be given enough space everywhere. Because he's an eminent personality, whatever he says, people would actually look to what he's saying. People would be inclined to listen to him. So carefully ignoring any such distraction, let's try to see his latest idea of 70-hour work week in perspective. As one exposed for an extended period of time to the work culture in Canada and the United States, where I presently live, I can say for a fact that nowhere in these countries employees are expected to work more than 35 hours a week as a rule. There are exceptions, like there are exceptions everywhere. In fact, the work culture here is that it's not uncommon to see the bosses encouraging people to utilize their privileges, including vacation, etc., so that the employee morale remains high. So much of importance is actually given to the work-life balance. That's something that the most managements are really very conscious of in their own interest. The companies here and the individual managers here are modern enough to realize that productivity would be much more where employee morale and motivational levels are high and professional scientific management principles are followed in letter, spirit and practice. In fact, I can actually cite an instance where one of my top bosses gave me a book to educate me on the egalitarian style of management. Egalitarian style of management is the prevailing work culture here. So, what I was possibly suggesting, I was trying to suggest something to my boss, and what I was suggesting, what it possibly reflected my hierarchical mindset coming from, I have actually worked in India also for quite a long time in a public sector. So that kind of influence might have actually played in my mind in the kind of suggestion that I was trying to make to my boss. But my boss disagreed with me and he gave me a book on egalitarian style of management to read. So much for the values that are being attached here to that style of management where the power distance, as they call it, it's very minimal. Anyway, more about that later in some other presentation. Of course, there are companies here too, like Goldman Sachs or some others, some consultant companies or companies in Wall Street, which are an exception. But even there, the employees becoming so frustrated and some even contemplating suicide is not really uncommon. Anyway, in the Indian context, this is not relevant, this is not valid at all. See, it's not needed. In the Indian context, where there is abundant qualified skilled and semi-skilled labor, What is required is not for employees to work 70 hours a week, but work at an optimum level of 35 to 40 hours depending upon the nature of work, but in every condition the employees will have to be provided with ideal working conditions. That's the more important thing. It's not working for 70 hours. When the ideal conditions are provided to the employee, the morale remains high. He identifies himself better with an organization. When he knows that the management is concerned about his own personal well-being, then he identifies himself more with the interest of the organization, and there is no need to goad, guide or lead by coercion. So the employee actually becomes a self-propelling individual. He knows what to do and he does it most responsibly. Instead, if there is a potential to employ more people, do so by all means, which will also reduce unemployment. So for better productivity, you don't have to make people work for 70 hours as Mr. Murthy is suggesting at the cost of the employee's personal well-being. Employ more people, that would reduce the unemployment, though the profit margin of the corporate, the capitalist or the industrialist would definitely come down. But is that not what our father of nation Gandhiji himself suggested? He suggested ownership of wealth and property by trusteeship. So Gandhiji suggested there has to be a trusteeship form of ownership so that the legitimacy of the existence of the capitalist is accepted, proved. In the case of, again coming back to what Mr. Narayan Murthy has said, I would have been happy if Mr. Murthy has chosen to talk about the need for improvement in managerial styles rather than the populist idea of 70-hour work week, which is absolutely short-sighted in my view and even detrimental to the interest of not only the workforce but would also be detrimental to the interest of the organization. Contrary to the general assumption and belief, egalitarian work culture is belief about the styles of management in the Western world. Because I have heard the leftists constantly talking about the capitalist evils and all that, talking about the Western world, the way the corporates are managed, the way the managerial styles are adopted in these countries. Contrary to such belief, egalitarian work culture is practiced here in the developed world, so-called developed world, helping the worker, first world, let's call it first world, helping the worker to naturally identify himself or herself with the organization, as I said before, and also the mission of the organization, and also the long-term objectives of the organization and the goals of the organization. The worker identifies himself. So Mr. Murthy should be talking about replacing the hierarchical work culture so prevalent in India to make it more egalitarian, as I said before. Mr. Murthy also should be talking about various managerial approaches through which the average worker is better motivated to turn out greater productivity. One of the fundamental principles of management, it's a well-known fact and an accepted fact, that salary, compensation or money is not the only factor that would actually motivate an individual to work. In fact, what would happen is that the worker believes it's his right to make more money, to get more money, to extract more money from the management, only when he doesn't feel part of the organization. When he actually feels part of the organization, he feels money actually becomes kind of secondary. He becomes so attached to the work. Anyway, these are the things that Mr. Murthy should be talking about, not blindly, just 70 hours or 80 hours work culture or whatever, being inspired by China. What is happening in China is that actually workers are made to work in ghetto-like environment. I mean, in spite of whatever the communists would claim, the communists in India would claim, there are no unions in China. No worker can even talk or raise any questions. There cannot be, the personal considerations are just not given any value at all, weightage at all. Now, so in such a situation, workers are made to work even 70 hours, 80 hours. Productivity of course goes up. But it's an established fact that productivity would indeed be more under autocracy. But is that not a very antithesis of democratic and humane values that India is supposed to live by? So in the Indian conditions, again, to keep it short, in the light of abundance of workforce of all categories, skilled, semi-skilled, technological, everything, there is no need to make any worker, there is no need for anybody to work for about 70 hours a week. You have to find people, you have to give employment to more people, thereby reducing unemployment levels too. So overall, given Mr. Murthy's stature and standing and the respect he commands, it's absolutely astounding that he has come up with such a preposterous idea, and that perhaps, I hate to say this, but that perhaps shows him for what he truly is intellectually. Thank you very much.